Hi, I'm Eric Deggans, TV critic and media analyst for National Public Radio, and I am so excited to welcome you on behalf of the Writers Guild Foundation to a conversation with the real heroes of Andor, the creator and the writers, right? Am I
Oh
right,
yeah,
guys? I know
absolutely.
my audience. So let's welcome virtually creator, writer, and executive producer Tony Gilroy, Dan Gilroy, Beau Willimon, and Tom Bissell, who are all writers on the show. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad you were able to come here and talk about the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So we are recording this on the day after the last batch of episodes have finally reached the public. And one of the things I wanted to ask you guys was sort of like, how are you feeling now? Like now, this thing that you have worked on for what, 5 or 6 years is fully out in the world. How's it feel now?
There's a lot of farewells that we've had along the way, the finishing the scripts and finishing the mix and color and I was with Diego yesterday. We did press all day yesterday, and we both had to admit that this is a big drop. I mean, we're trying to decide your potential is gone, it's everything's the potential is all over, and it's released. You're really happy that it's out there, but it does, the pride is definitely mixed with pre-nostalgia.
What did the rest of you guys think? Dan, what do you think? Now
Uh,
that's out.
well, the last block dropped as you said last night. You can't help. It's a really weird thing because you can watch people reacting to the shows when they come on. So
Right.
you'd have to be utterly selfless and egoless not to sort of pay attention to, particularly when the people's reactions are positive. And the people's reactions to the entire season have been so overwhelming. And then last night it culminated, and I only watched a couple of people's reactions, but to see how powerfully it landed with people is an incredibly unique experience. Because I mean, it's one thing to read a review in a magazine or online a month later, but this is real time. So it's just, I feel like I've been a part of something that's highly entertaining and really strong, but at the same time, dare I say it, relevant, which was never the intent, but it's value added, and it's incredible. I mean, I'm just basking in watching people watch it. I'm sort of watching it over their shoulder. It's very interesting.
And Tom, I want to talk to you in detail about the fact that you wrote the last batch of episodes that we've seen, but it must feel particularly poignant for you to come up on, these last episodes coming out. This is all your stuff, man.
Well, yeah, I had some help from a gentleman on this call, but yeah, I've been thinking a lot about what this feels like now that it's over. Like I turned in my last drafts of those three a week before season one premiered. So I've been waiting 2.5 years for last night. I was waiting for it, and I thought I'd be really excited to watch a bunch of reactions, and I watched a couple, and then I was like, I think that's enough. I think I'm happy, and I'm well aware that I don't know if I will ever get to work on something this big, this watched, this admired with people like the gentleman on this call with me again. I could choose to be sad about that. Instead, I choose to be delighted that I was able to be a part of it. So no sadness, just joy. For me, I'm just really delighted this happened.
And Bo, I don't want to leave you out if you got some thoughts too.
Look, I mean, it's a miracle to make anything. It's multiple miracles to make anything good, and it's beyond miraculous when something cuts through all the noise in a very noisy world and makes even the slightest bit of an impact. And you know, it's overwhelming in all the best ways. I've had more people reach out to me in the past month and about this than anything in years, and people that I haven't been in touch with in years. When people say it's a beloved
franchise. I mean, it truly is beloved, and so many people come out of the woodwork, people that surprise you, that are diehard Star Wars fans that you never would have guessed, and many people who have found Star Wars through Andor, who had never really engaged with it before, which I know is one of Tony's big aims, and I think has largely succeeded. It's an amazing experience, and yeah, it's all I think one can rightfully take away from it is gratitude and a sense of earned pride.
So, critics have said that Andor is one of the best adaptations of Star Wars that they've seen in years. And Tony, I know it's hard for you to take a compliment. I've seen it in the press before, but I'm going to tell you anyway. That's what people are saying about this show. And I wonder, A, how do you handle compliments like this? And B, what is it about the writing in particular that may have distinguished Andor when people look at all the storytelling that's gone down on Star Wars?
Uh, I mean, our mandate from before I even started was to break new ground, change it, make it different,
Hmm.
take the Latin Mass out of the church,
Yep.
give us a new grammar, a new vocabulary, new possibilities. And you know, when people say that, people on this call know um, how confusing early meetings can be with the process of writing scripts for producers and directors and studios. And so uh, I have a pretty controversial approach to work. It's also a bit of a luxury. I I'm of the camp I'd rather show you a lot of stuff for free beforehand to make sure we're talking about the same thing before I really get involved. Not everybody can make that decision. It's definitely a luxury. I'm aware of that. I came back with him in the beginning and said, okay, the guy's going to go to a brothel and kill two cops who mess with him. How about that? That's what I'm going to open with. All right. And okay. And that started you know, uh that opened the door to, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we've been free range and let run, they really let us run all the way through here, but we have really pushed it. So they wanted something different. The objective is truth. The objective is, can we have absolute realistic behavioral truth in a ripping yarn about revolution? You know, can we keep you desperate to find out what happens next and absolutely uh, inevitably perplexed by what people are doing? That was the goal. So it was really, um, yeah, I didn't change my game to come here. They kind of knew what they were going to do. So it's been a mutual gamble. As far as taking compliments, I really, you know, you don't even know how to push that away, because even that seems hubristic in some way. I don't know. But yeah, no, you know what? My father really was a big proponent of accepting affirmation and accepting defeat. And his attitude was, when you have your teeth kicked in, embrace it, don't hide from it, take it all in at once, eat it, shit it out, and move on. And he was also very irritated with me while he was alive when I was having some success, that I was perplexed or squeamish with it. He really tuned me up about the fact that these moments are few and far between, and very few people get them, and it's a crime against the fates to not enjoy it.
Yeah, and you sort of talk about doing something new and sort of getting rid of the Latin Mass, and of course that means no Jedi's, no lightsabers, just a couple mentions of the Force, really. And was that the idea from the beginning? And was there
Mhm.
ever any temptation, Disney or somebody saying, "Hey, do we really want to do a Star Wars show that doesn't have these sort of signature elements in it?"
I mean, I can't speak for the chorus of opinion that might have been behind the scenes at Disney, but in its front to us, which is Kathy Kennedy and Bob Iger and Alan Bergman and I mean, these guys can tell you we called stuff in from the writers' room. We called stuff in sometimes, emergency call, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Is that going to be okay? We never, once we left that room and once we went, I mean, I know it sounds absolutely impossible, but we've never taken a note on 1,500 pages of script. We changed one word in season one, and legitimately so, and righteously so. They were right. We changed one word. Um,
What was the word? I'm just curious.
in episode 12, when Fiona Shaw gave her holographic eulogy, Marva, she said "fuck the Empire," and we put it in there, and I was like, I thought that was worth a lot of money on social media. I thought that I wrote a long legal brief where it was like, this is why this is worth it financially. And
Tony was ready to have the t-shirts made, like
but no, my argument was like financial. It's like the amount of Twitter that this will generate and eyeballs and like interest is so far outstrips anybody who'd be upset by it but they don't want that. But they were probably right. I think they were probably right. But it was a
Well,
conversation. It wasn't a.
you did get bastards in there, so.
Oh, we have some. No, we have a couple things.
So that was good. So I'm kind of interested in sort of how the writing process works for you guys. How sort of the overall arc of the second season was figured out, and then how each of you sort of takes that and then comes up with what you're going to write in the episodes that you create.
Tony says he front loads stuff and gives stuff, a lot of stuff for free, because Tony is prolific, and he's not just prolific, he's really strong. So when he came into the writer's room for season one, and certainly for season two, he came in with a highly specific document outline as to, pretty much every beat of how he saw the entire second season. So the writer's room for us, it was like a week and a half, almost every day. And we were just going through his outline, fixing this, changing that. Does that hold up? Can we make that improve? So we're just going through his outline. Because naturally, when you have an outline, he's not gonna stop the outline to come through the specifics of an action sequence or the mechanics of something. So that's, we're filling in those gaps in the writer's room. And we go through the 9 days, we get to the end of it. No blocks have been assigned. Both seasons, Tony assigns the blocks. Tony gave each one of us our blocks. Then we were responsible for going off and coming up with our own outline for our blocks, which reflected Tony's outline and the notes that we had taken on the outlines. We sent the outlines in. We got the okay at some point. We started writing the episodes. We sent the episodes in. Tony invariably would give us a ton of notes. We'd do our second pass or third pass, give it to him. And then I don't know about Beau and Tom, but I never really saw the scripts again after that. They entered a pipeline that Tony had his hand on, which was his rewriting, improving, conforming. Then it went off to directors and stuff. So I don't know about, again, Beau and Tom, but once I handed in my stuff, I probably spoke maybe only a couple times to Tony about a couple of minor questions. He knew the answers to almost everything that he wanted to do. So that was my experience.
Everything Dan says is true, and I have to say my initial reaction when I asked Tony season one, all right, so what's this room look like? How many weeks? How long are we gonna work on this? So, I was just thinking like, what's my life gonna look like? Time commitment. This could be months. And he's like, a week, maybe a week and some change. And I laughed. I thought he was joking. And then he's like, no, that's I think that's all we need. And then I thought he was crazy. And then then we got into doing the thing itself. And as Dan said, because I mean Tony walked in the door with I mean we read it in advance, but 100+ pages of Bible beyond an already very advanced pilot episode. There was a lot of wind in our sails. And luckily this group of people, we've all been around the block in various ways. So the combined decades of in the trenches experience, I think, we knew we had a job to do, that we had to do it quickly, that we were there to support a guy with an extremely strong and precise vision. And then it just, best idea wins. keeping focused, moving fast, letting instinct rule the day, and trusting a lot of years of craftsmanship under your belt to give that instinct, the sort of have faith in that instinct. And then, yeah, as in any writing process, there's the grind. You just got to go through a lot of mistakes and trial and error, and stuff that you thought was super solid in the room sometimes proves a little shaky once it gets on the page, and other stuff that you weren't sure about suddenly locks into place and almost writes itself, and that's just the writing process. So yeah.
The rooms that I've been in have been a mixture of difficult to complicated to sometimes outright viper's dens. And the thing that I was so struck by with this room was the lack of ego, the decisiveness, so decisive. And that's the thing I took away from it, was that the need to be that decisive to keep moving. And I remember, Beau, you and I were out on the patio of the Soho Grand, and you came out and you said, most rooms are not like this. And you said, you're not going to be in a lot of rooms like this. And it was just the collaborative lack of ego and the decisiveness, again, that I took away from it. And I hope every room I'm in has some flavor of that, because my God, it was helpful.
Now, that said, there was no ego that I ever discerned, and we were collaborative. But for edification for people who are watching this was a contentious writer's room. I think the best ones are. We are arguing constantly. It's never getting abusive. It's never.
What were the biggest arguments?
Everything.
Everything.
She should do this. They should respond to a light instead of a chalk mark. Whatever it is. There's 50,000 decisions, and I think Beau said it. I think we all felt the best idea wins. But if you walked into this room and you didn't know we all knew each other, you might think, wow, this is like a really kind of contentious room, and how does anything get done? But it's marked by we're moving very quickly. We're moving because there's so much good stuff there to work with, and there's so much to do. But we're beating everything. We're beating each other up.
You have to. It's not just kicking the tires. I mean, it's trying to slash them. It's trying to kick the tires off a cliff. It's. Right. I mean, you understand the weight of what you're trying to achieve here, just in terms of its scope and scale, and also that you're working with it. I mean, the stakes are high. This is Star Wars after all, which can be kind of overwhelming, intimidating when you think about it that way. But it's like, everything has to survive the room, and when we talk about best idea winning, sometimes that comes after you spend an hour battling over what seems like a very small thing, but you have to recognize you're battling over it because something tells the room collectively that's an important fulcrum that we need to nail that. And other things you just have faith, what, we kind of have a rough sense of what should happen here, but we have faith that we'll be able to figure it out, or whoever's assigned this will figure it out in the outline stage. One example, a concrete example, is the in season 1, Kino can't swim, right? I mean, we were talking, I don't even remember whose idea it was, but we were talking about Tony's like, I'm not sure I want this guy to come back. I mean, we kind of want him to die because I don't want to leave that door open, but how do we do that? Is there a gunfight? It's he needs a noble death, And then someone, whoever said it, is like, he can't swim. And there was 5 seconds of dead silence. And it was just I think everyone got sort of chills, yeah, that's it. There you go. Boom. But there'd been a half hour of trying to figure that out until boom, it hits. And then it's good, solid, move on.
Are you officially saying he drowned? For all
just saying he can't swim. Just saying he can't swim,
Just for reference, we never had an argument where suddenly 2 people became entrenched and it turned contentious. It never came to that. It was always sort of no, it's not fully there. Just keep going. And then, like Beau said, we're just oh, that sounds good. And Tony, if there were a dispute, Tony would decide it. It's not a democracy. Tony's running the show. So Tony would decide any disputes, if there was, not that there were many, at all.
Yeah.
I was looking at my notes this morning from the notes I was taking during the meetings, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but I quoted something Beau said to Tony during one of these contentious moments, which was, I think, "Forgive me, Tony, I'm just trying to make your fucking show interesting." And I remember I quoted that and wrote Beau Willimon to Tony Gilroy.
Wow,
February 12th.
Wrote that down. Now that makes me sound like an asshole.
No. Wait a minute. Couple things before they go too far.
Thanks.
First of all, I should point out that there's another 2 people in this room that wouldn't normally be in a room.
Mhm.
Luke Hull, who's the production designer, who's been working with me for months before we got there, who's going to have to build the whole damn show, he's in the room every minute. Zana Wollenberg, who's the producer, who's going to have to sell all this and build it and pay for it and do everything, she's in the room. They know what I came in with. They know what my intentions are. They know the worlds we've started to build, but they are watching the show bubble up and be squashed down and be battered into shape in front of them. So they're watching bad. Just as important to watch a bad idea go away as it is to see a good idea arrive. That is unusual. I think the easiest way to, I think they're right. I think that if you brought in a human resources person, you know, instead of a room service waiter, they would probably run downstairs and break the fire alarm. I mean, people are not being pleasant because everybody's super pro. And part of being super pro is you know what's difficult and not what's not difficult. You know, you can sort of go, you know, there was nobody who was getting lost in something where you go like, why the fuck would we worry about that? That's just like plumbing. That'll take care of itself. This is what everybody knew where the protein of problems were. And so there's that collective understanding. And I think the safest way, the most comfortable way to think about it is if you really think about it like recording sessions in a way, everybody's like a studio musician, a really good player, man. You're trying to work out an arrangement, you're trying to find the hooks, you're trying to lay down an album really quick. And nobody needs charts, everybody's ear is good. And I could never be as cruel to anybody else in the room as I am to myself. So the level of hostility that I wage on my own work,
Right.
I have to calibrate back a few degrees to do the room or do notes. I mean, I think cruelty and maybe that's the wrong word, but
I think that is the wrong word because cruelty implies a
Real,
kind
well,
of power.
maybe it's more like
meanness,
a
just
ruthlessness.
like
Maybe it's
It's
more
tough.
suspicion and
It's more
rigor.
it's
maybe it's
toughness,
more a
man.
ruthlessness
Yeah.
about
Yeah, like
ideas.
I think that's right, Eric. Like there's a ruthlessness with the story. Like you're all, I mean,
I don't
Tony,
cut myself a break ever.
no,
Yeah.
but I mean,
And what's
but
odd is that comes out in the storytelling as well. You have characters that are ruthless about serving the greater good or what they feel is the
Yeah, yeah.
mission, you know, and that's part of what distinguishes the show. I did want to ask a little bit about this notion of creating a TV show that's going to lead into a film. And I know some people might think that it might make things easier to know where your main characters are going to be when the show ends up. But it also struck me that it's tough to create a story like that where you're still surprising the audience, you're still coming up with new things, and you're coming up with new characters that are as good as the characters they already know. And so I'm particularly interested in how you face this challenge of getting this story teed up to Rogue One, and particularly Tom, since you wrote those last three episodes, if you faced challenges in making that happen.
Yeah, it was one of the really tricky pieces of architecture emotionally, was making something dramatically satisfying. Like take the character of General Draven, Cassian's handler. Now, if you watch Rogue One, he's not completely convinced that the Death Star is real and that this is actionable information. But within the context of Episode 12, he has to be moved to a point where he lets Cassian go off to meet Tivik on the Ring of Kafrene, which the first thing you see Cassian do in Rogue One. So getting him to a place where he feels congruent with his character in Rogue One, he lets Cassian go, seems to encourage it, and that's a payoff that feels satisfying, but doesn't totally annul where he's at in Rogue One. I remember, Tony, if you recall, like that was a tricky bit of like getting him there, and that line I think that you finally came up with, that he basically says, if this is a trap, it's a brilliant way to spring it. Like the need for that to connect the two guys, the two characters, 10 years apart, I thought it was fun. It was half character writing and then half this weird math problem that was, really interesting.
There's
Tony,
no
what?
show without the ending. We
Right.
wouldn't have been able to do it. I mean, I think the question is really easy. The big part of the question is really essentially answered. Having the ending made everything possible. I can't imagine being on a show there are shows, and they shall remain nameless, where people start and they have really good ideas and they're really exciting and it's really groovy and cool. And they suddenly have traction, and maybe more traction than they ever thought, and they don't know where to go.
Right.
I don't ever want to be on that show. I have to know what's going to happen. If you're, I mean, you know how it is. If you have a great movie script, somehow weirdly, no matter how extraneous they are, every scene is about the movie, right? Like somehow in a great script, every scene somehow is about the movie. And you only get that when you have a destination, I think. Beau,
Yeah.
you agree? No, I don't know. You
Yes,
like
but
open-ended. You like
it's so
swinging.
funny. I just saw
Because you
like
didn't run House of Cards. I worked for him in House of Cards, and he was the
Mhm.
opposite. He made so much trouble, and I went to the room a couple times, and I have to say, his strategy, which is why I wanted him to be on this, was so reckless and insane to me when I would go there, because he would make it as absolutely impossible as it could possibly be. Let's do this. And you're like, there's no, what are you gonna do? And like, it was a Houdini trick all the time. And that's a very groovy management. I didn't run the show that way, but I was in awe of Cards, how he did it.
little, I mean, apples and oranges a bit, because I mean, you always knew with this that you were leading up to Rogue One, and I think most shows you might have an idea of where you want to get to by the end of it in the large scheme of things, but that's very far away in success. It is seasons away, and you have to be open to the fact that you'll discover things, and like life, wherever you think you're going will ultimately change. I was just watching a clip of George Saunders, the great short story writer, today on Instagram, and he was saying the opposite of what Tony's saying. He's like, if I ever know where I'm going, I feel like I'm just like, painting by numbers. I have to not know where I'm going to make it fun and interesting for me. So, I mean, I think whatever works, honestly. Obviously, in this case, because you're veering towards this pivotal moment in the lore, in the canon, and one unlike any other, which is like mass, like it's mass martyrdom in Rogue One. It's like that is unlike anything in Star Wars. You have to earn it. And I think that that sort of casting its sort of guiding light over everything we did. That, as Tony said from the beginning, this is the story about the people that are the gravel that paved the road to revolution. You asked earlier, Eric, about like the Force and all that, so, and no Jedis. Well, like, I think one of the cool things that Tony's done, and you see it in Rogue One for sure. You even see it a bit in A New Hope, where like Luke can only get to that Death Star after a lot of X-wings bite the dust. You know,
Yep.
there is no Jedi, there is no Force, there is none of that. If there weren't a lot of regular people who did extraordinary things and made extraordinary sacrifices along the way, and that was the guiding light which Rogue One established and placed that theme front and center, that informed this entire thing. And so, when in doubt, whenever you were stuck, it was always remember where we're going, and how do you earn that in every moment, every scene, every arc, every character.
Yeah, I kept thinking weirdly of that scene in Rogue One where Darth Vader sort of cuts through all those guys, trying to get to Princess Leia before she leaves. And I'm thinking Rogue One is sort of the story of those dudes. And what did they go through to get to that moment where ultimately their role was just to delay Darth Vader by a couple seconds so Princess Leia could get away. That's just my Star Wars nerd's way of looking at it. Um, so one of well, to talk a little bit about the last three batches of episodes a little bit more. One thing we got there was the origin story of Luthen Rail, and you guys kind of held that back for a while. And I was wondering, why did it take us so long to sort of learn about this, the backstory of this amazing character? Stellan Skarsgård's performance has sort of been the backbone of the whole show, but we really didn't find out who he was until almost the end of the second season.
He made me promise when he signed on. Beau convinced me. I mean, Beau's as responsible for Stellan being in the show as anybody. I had a couple other people I was really interested in. one person in particular blew me away, and Beau just kept saying Stellan, 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 Stellan. And Zana Wallenberg had done Chernobyl with him, and they were like, I was like, I don't know what was wrong with me, but I've been the beneficiary of some really some ruthless other voices along the way. Use the word ruthless. And when Stellan came on, he was like, he goes, I'll sign on. We are going to do 5 years in the beginning. And he goes, but you got to kill me after 2. And I said, look, if you're unhappy, well, if we get that far and you're unhappy, it's a pen stroke. So we will, yes. And then was trying to figure out what his backstory was and why, what he was doing there. And I wrote I wrote a couple different versions. There was a very, very ornate, very complicated sort of whole thing. And he and I both recognized it was probably just too much. And he said, he goes, look, he goes, let's not do it now. He goes, but when we get there, I don't want it to be revenge. I'll do anything but revenge. I was like, wow, that's cool. And then really simply, we had no idea how good Elizabeth Dulau, who plays Cleo, was going to be. She was a random hire. She was a last minute hire. She's first gig out of RADA. She seemed very good in the audition. Her first couple scenes were very, very good. And I don't think it's really, I don't know what episode it is, but finally Vel comes and says, hey, I gave him Aldani. What have you done lately? And she goes, I don't do lately. I do always. And that scene, I remember watching the dailies on that and watching me cut together and going like, oh man. And she just was such a revelation. You're kind of going like, okay, well, we need to explain this. And I don't know, I can't think of a better framework than we had to flash back to make it. Yeah, if you're going to violate your grammar that extremely, okay, now we're gonna do flashbacks. Yeah, 20 episodes in, 20 hours in, we're gonna start a new language. It better be for a reason. So it had that, right? I think that was I think we came in, I think we had a lot of that. I know I knew I wanted Dedra to go into the gallery a long time ago. I wanted Edie to go into the gallery. That's the other scene I never got.
But you pick up on what Beau was saying about how the pilots that you see in Rogue and all the people, what led them there, and the little tiny part they play in this. And you look at Luthen, and when I'm watching this thing, you go like, how many people, when this is all said and done, are even going to know about Luthen? And if they do know about him, half of them are going to think about him in a negative light because the smear campaign that's gone against him. So to devote an episode to his legacy and to understand he is one of thousands of cogs, probably one of the most important cogs, but to get the backstory in 10, and now you're going off into Rogue. And the message for me, sort of when I watch it in its entirety, is everybody's got an incredible sort of backstory that led them there. There's a legitimate weight to their backstory that's led them there. Luthen's is obviously extraordinarily dramatic. But when Tony came up with the idea of doing the standalone episode, it just really sort of tonally felt right.
Yeah, and the one of the running themes throughout the whole show is none of us will see the other side. None of us are going to see the rebellion succeed. We're all going to die. Luthen says it explicitly. Saw says it. Others imply it. You were running under this assumption that all of these people will be forgotten. The galaxy will remember the Luke Skywalker's the world, but none of these fuckers, right? And yet, what's so moving and we're pretty ruthless about not being sentimental in this show. In a franchise where George Lucas himself says the power of the Force is love. Love is what connects everything. And here you see love in the most unsentimental way, not revenge that motivates this guy, but he wants Clea to stay alive. You have the go bag. You survive. You might see the other side of it. You make it worth it. Has he really given up everything when he says that, in that speech in season 1? No, he has Clea. He might not admit it to himself or anyone, but we, the audience, get to see it. And that's really powerful and moving. And so moving in Tom's episode, the toasts, where let's call out the names of all the people we've seen bite the dust. And even if it's just that little memorial over drinks, in a hut on Yavin for that night, and no one else knows, each of these people motivate each other and make it worth it, you know. And it's that collective desire to honor those that are closest to you, and even if honoring them means smothering them in a hospital gurney, you know, that actually is the juice, the rido of the rebellion, you know. And that's a hard thing to earn, you know. So it might have taken a season and 3/4 to be able to do it, and earn it. But man, Tony and Tom certainly did, in my not so humble opinion.
I'm going to say one other thing, Tom. You know, you're divvying out the episodes. It was pretty clear Tom was going to take the back end of this because he was the biggest nerd on the show and most into Star Wars. But he also has a young daughter, and Danny has a daughter. I have a daughter, but he's got a young daughter, and
Whose favorite character is Clea, incidentally?
well, okay, but you know, who's gonna break their own heart the hardest, you know?
Right. Well, I
The
mean,
thing
and that sort of reminds me of even the very end of the show. Spoiler alert. Um, um, Bix leaves Cassian, and then we find out that she had a child with him. And not, you know, I know some people have described that ending as sort of sad because Cassian will never know that he has a child, but it also strikes me a reflection of what Beau was talking about. You know, Bix made the ultimate sacrifice. It probably would have been more better for the two of them to stay together. They would have enjoyed that more as people. But she sacrificed all that because she knew she was pregnant and she wanted to preserve the future, even if it damaged both of them, which I thought was a wonderful callback. I don't know if you intended that,
Yeah, no,
but that's the way
absolutely.
that's the
And
way it
also
played.
to see her, there's so many things that it does, and to see her really on her feet, you know, really on her ground, mother courage, you know. There's nothing there's nothing tentative about that. Her and Audrey is really a surprising actress and really knew she was capable of giving that vibe. Um, and also helped it also helped Danny's, you know, it also helped the speech when she leaves, if there was that, which seemed a lot more delicate, to be honest with you, in the room, and seemed a lot more delicate in production. And there was a lot of questions about how close we were shading her because you're shooting out a sequence too, and I'm leaving because I want you. I'm leaving because I feel you have a destiny that I'll be in the way of. It's a it's an unusual idea, I suppose, and we were very close to the edge on it. And this also really helped. It doesn't need any help, but I think it was in my mind, you know, for anybody who's in doubt about that, this will fully explain that she was pregnant when she left, you know.
Right.
Didn't need it, but it helps.
Exactly, exactly. And that connects to another scene in the second season that I think was deemed a little controversial, which was Bix nearly getting sexually assaulted. And it felt like that was something that we also hadn't seen in a Star Wars project before. Certainly not sort of spelled out the way it was. And I was wondering if there was any concern or worry about approaching something like that, or did it feel sort of natural where the story would go?
Yeah, I mean, I get 1,500 pages and a half a blank check to write a story about revolution, about fascism, rebellion. Um, I don't know when anybody else is going to get the chance to ever do that. I'm certainly not. I don't know when anybody has a chance to do it before. All these resources tell that story. Now, it's not like I'm I'm way too ruthless and way too interested in entertaining to uh, make a laundry list and just cram everything in the bag. But boy, oh boy, everything I can get in that feels legit and organic, I want to go for it. So man, I got farm workers, I got people that are in exile, I got people that are hiding out. Well, I want to put pressure on. Well, my God, what why wouldn't I do that? And you know, I think what people are think one of the cool things that we did collectively along the way was always keep in mind that fascism just doesn't just kill the people it's oppressing. It goes after its own foot soldiers. It goes after its own. Though they're the final victims of the joke, right? It always comes as power centralized, but along the way, all these people. And what is power? What is the real pain? What is the real effect of authoritarianism and fascism? It's not the people on the ground don't necessarily have any agenda at all, but they have a badge or they have a gun or they have a truck or they have some sort of cheesy, shitty little power that they use over somebody else. It's the petty cruelties and it's the collective hive mind uh, destruction of community that is the small satisfactions. And man, I I'd be bummed out if we didn't have that. We put it in, it went up the chain, no one ever said anything about it, so we did it.
But I think also you got to look at it, how it lands, because the franchise has always been based on not exploring what the empire and the fascism and the authoritative exertion of power is really about. So this show comes along, and it's kind of a surprise that people go like, "Oh wow, sexual assault and implied and rape. This is so unusual." All the films before, they're blowing up planets. They're killing billions of entities and creatures. I mean, and here's this one incident, and this is the thing that people latch onto. And I understand it because tonally, the Star Wars audience has never been exposed to a level of malevolence that the Empire really has exerted all along. So I think there were people, when I watched some of the comments, there were people who thought, well, the Empire was bad, but it seemed like they made the trains run on time, and it seemed like life was kind of stable. But they never themselves went in and looked and go, well, if they're capable of blowing up a planet, what does that really mean on a granular level? Tony came in, applied it to a granular level. Sexual assault is one of 1,000 atrocities that could be explored on a daily basis in any corner of the empire. But I understand why people were sort of like going, why is this so unusual? Because they'd never considered it before. Because this is a testament to how groundbreaking this show is. There's, for the 40 whatever years that Star Wars has been done, nobody decided to go, let's really look at what fascism and authoritative, authority really looks like when it's applied to oppress people. And I think it woke a lot of people up because that's what it is.
Yeah, Tony, I've seen you say in other interviews that the show might feel like it's drawn from current events because humanity goes through these cycles of authoritarianism and rebellion. But when I saw that storyline, I really could feel sort of the immigrant experience and some of the things we've seen with undocumented immigrants, and it felt like a lot of that was wrapped up in that storyline. And of course, people are talking about authoritarianism in the U.S. now, and feeling a resonance with the show. And so I was wondering, as you're maybe these specific things don't inspire the larger story, but as you're writing it out, clearly you've got to be a little influenced by what you're experiencing in the moment.
I don't know when immigration hasn't been an issue. I mean, I don't know when it hasn't been, you know, the go back and look what the Irish went through in New York City. You just dig anywhere, dig a hole in any ground, anywhere you want to go. How are the, how are the what happened to indigenous people in Mexico when the Spanish arrived? Just go back what the Chinese did when they took over Manchuria. Go back. I mean, pick Odessa, pick anywhere you want. Having papers, having legitimacy. I mean, we deal with slavery in some sense in Narkina, but I mean,
Yeah.
we're not overtly doing that. I mean, that's another, I mean, I don't know when did that start? I think it goes back to the very first campfire. So
Right, right. Very true, very true. So Beau, I don't know, you may not remember, but we first met when I was hosting a show for CNN, and I interviewed you about House of Cards and the Netflix version that you created. And Tony talked a little bit about how that experience was different from how you guys work on Andor. But I was sort of interested in whether the way House of Cards talked about politics, the way it dealt with sort of the ruthlessness of people who want to run things, was there any sort of common themes that you found there that maybe you were writing about here as well?
I mean, in the most general sense, anytime you're talking about power, anytime you're talking about, you know, people that are sort of navigating a treacherous environment, where any wrong turn could, could not bode well. I mean, from a pure storytelling perspective, I mean, you always are going to the fundamentals, whether it's House of Cards or whether it's Andor or whether it's a three camera, half hour sitcom, which is, who are these people? What do they care about? What's preventing them from getting what they want? And how do we connect to them? That's it. I mean, when I first talked to Tony about this, he asked if I was interested in working on the show. I was a little flabbergasted because I grew up with the action figures and loved Star Wars, but Tom knows more in his pinky finger about Star Wars canon than I will ever know. And Tony said, "Look, we're telling a human story here, a human story about how someone goes from being selfish and self-interested to making the ultimate sacrifice in Rogue One." And we want to believe that, we want to feel it, we want to make it felt. And that, when you know what the story you're trying to tell, in some ways the genre, the tone, all that's the window dressing, because the fundamentals are the same. I mean, the biggest difference is we had, I did 4 to 6 weeks just of getting the outline for the season in order, and then 20-25 weeks for a room, and 2 weeks per episode in outlining. So we were breaking trail a lot slower and a lot more methodically. And I think the process here of just like sort of leaping into it, and as I said earlier, with a lot of wind in the sails, but and just using speed and using faith in each other to our advantage, and ultimately knowing that Tony was going to make all of us look good, was a radical experience for me. And so I felt like I learned a lot more from this than anything I brought to the table.
Mm. So I got to say, Ben Mendelsohn as Critic, I've loved seeing him pop up in the show. I want a whole spin-off series on him. I'm just
So
gonna
does he.
lay that. I'm just gonna lay that right here. I want a
I
spin-off
think
series on
he's doing
Critic.
it right now at home. Yeah, no,
I want a
great.
spin-off series on Cassian's offspring, whoever that is.
Right.
I'm just I'm laying it out. But it was interesting that you guys also seem to be very careful about how you introduce characters that were in the original movie. Careful about how you used him, careful about how you used Forrest Whitaker's Saw Gerrera, careful about how you used Alan's K2SO. Can you talk a little bit about how deciding how you were going to use these characters, when you were going to bring them in, being careful about how you deployed them?
I mean, I got in trouble for saying this before, but it's expensive to bring them back. It really is. And if you bring somebody back for one scene, you have to pay them for the whole episode. And like I do have to keep my mind, I do have to keep some part of my brain on the cash register a little bit. And when you can help out, you don't want to, particularly if you're asking for so much. I think it's because most of, I mean, Zana got so tired of me going, well, I got more characters. I have more characters. I need 6 more day players to do this thing. I'm chewing up, we're chewing up like actors like crazy. And like, so I'm asking for things all the time. So I try to be a helpful, um, so they have to be legitimately like consolidated and part of it. There were other people that I thought I was going to have to bring back that we didn't have to do. I thought, oh, we're going to have to bring back Danny Mays for Tivik, and I thought, oh, maybe we'll get in as we get later on into as we get towards the Rogue thing. But then Tom and I we figured out the math on how it ended up working out at the end with Young and all the information. And I was like, wow, look how it actually sort of came together more quickly and easily. We didn't have to do it. So there's a couple of people that we wanted to have come back that either couldn't or wouldn't, in some cases. And there's more faces in Yavin that we would have been happy to accumulate that we couldn't, but it's just have to be judicious about it and careful about it. Yeah.
There were some people from Rogue that I wish we could have seen. I understand why we didn't. I think we did a very good job of making those Rogue characters feel, have a few different shadings now. I think the thing that I loved about working on the show, and that I think that I learned from it the most, was there's no cannon fodder in our show. Like, it's a show about people being left in the historical dust with their names not being forgotten, and yet the narrative of the show shows the opposite of that. Even the Imperials in the show are sort of characterized. Maybe not everyone's fully characterized, but nobody is made intentionally anonymous. And so I took my responsibility to Rogue One, my favorite Star Wars movie. And if you would have told me in 2016, when I turned to my friend that I saw it with and said, was that the best Star Wars movie, or is it just me? If you'd have told me like 9 years later I'd be working on the on-ramp to that, I would not have believed it. So I took my responsibility to those characters and Tony's, commitment to showing, bringing the series to a satisfying end, but also, making sure all the circuits lined up between the two projects. Like, that was an honor that I'll never forget.
And I know we're getting short on time, but man, there's so many characters I want to mention. Deidre Miro, man, for some reason I thought she would end up on the Death Star. She seemed like the kind of schemer that would do well in the Empire. So the ultimate middle manager. What happened to her? Why did she wind up in prison, guys?
And she it's worse than death.
Yeah.
I mean, Beau and Danny and I lived through Narkina. When you write Narkina, you have to live it, And we really got in there mentally in the room and man, oh man, if you really put yourself in there imaginatively for a few minutes, you'll say, give me nothing rather than that.
Well, it's why her supervisor killed himself, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Partagas, Anton Lesser. Let's just do a shout out for everybody here. Is there an actor in this show who does more heavy lifting for writers? He should get a
Incredible.
WGA award. He should get the
Incredible.
WGA award. There should be an award for the actor who carries the most pipe for writers that year without ever showing it. That dude, Danny came up with the idea. It's from a movie called Paper Chase. Remember the Paper Chase with John Houseman?
Absolutely.
Danny coming back and going, I got this guy Partagas. He's going to be the boss, and he's going to be like the Socratic thing. He's going to be this bitch with all these people. And it just went from there. And then when Anton came on, but triple WGA Halo. There should be a supercut of Anton Lesser carrying
now for people who might not,
the writers.
people who might not understand exactly what you're saying, can you explain a little bit more why
He is moving the story forward, doing the kind of exposition that it could just be dreary or just
in vaudeville, they'd call Max the explainer, the guy who comes out and is like, let me get you up to speed, and here's everything you need to know for everything to make sense. And you ache for those scenes. You're like, when do I get to see him again?
Right.
But as a fan, we also have to shout out to Genevieve O'Reilly, who made the Senate cool. And one of the things that Tony did that I'm a super fan of is the Senate is such a vaulted thing in Star Wars canon. But if you think about it, you don't see it all that much in all of the movies. And it was a major focus. And Mon Mothma, that whole, I mean, we're talking about all the gravel, but that gravel also could come diamond studded. And what she did to make the Coruscant side of this story alive and felt and dangerous and exciting was super cool. But Tony, Tony wanted to make Mon Mothma a major element from the beginning, and that was a super smart decision.
Just going back to Deadrift for 1 second, because Tony brought up a point earlier about how it's not just about people who fight, the Empire. It's the people in the Empire who get ground up in the machine as well. Tony's a great student of history, and certainly when you look at Stalin or any, fascist state, it's the people within are getting ground up constantly. So Dedra almost had to be ground up. There are no real success stories in a fascist authoritarian state, because at some point you're going to be ground up in the machine. Something's going to trip you up, treason, overreaching, whatever it is. I never thought Dedrick could ever get out of this in any sort of successful way, for the reason that Tony said.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even thinking about the actor who says rebellions are built on hope, you know, paying off where that came from. Tony, I love that scene or I love that story about how your son inspired you
No.
to figure out how to put that
At
in the
this
story.
desk with this background, he'd walk in the door, check his mail. He'd come in all the time, come to the house, get his mail. He's a grown ass man. He'd come in, he's an actor, and he would go, okay, stress test. And he would come, whatever dialogue was on my screen, because there was dialogue on my screen for 5 years. So I was always here. And he would read the scenes as badly as possible, the worst version, to embarrass as a joke, the stress test. And he came in one day and they had gone to see Rogue, and he's like, well, what are you going to do about rebellions are built on hope? And I go, I don't know. Doesn't he say that to Jin and the thing? And he goes, yeah, but where's it come from? I go, really? He goes, dude, you got to get on that, man. You better get on that. That's got to come from somewhere. I'm like, oh my God, the
There
bellhop.
you go.
Give Sam the
Tom, as a
WGA
resident
award.
nerd, I'm wondering if there's any other stuff like that where you were like, we got to do this, or we gotta pay
He
that.
Okay,
really did in the beginning. And I think on just even in the beginning on Rogue, I was like, I don't know. He goes, man, here's some scenes you got to watch. You got to see how good this could be. And no, he's been a nudge all the way through.
well, let me set the record straight on one thing. I am a Star Wars nerd compared to these guys, but compared to Star Wars nerds, I'm just a normal human being who watched the movies. So I just want to make sure that is.
I hear you, my man. I hear you. Well, and so I was the final question, because we've been talking for a while. I know you guys have other things to do. But my final question was sort of whether any of you have seen Rogue One recently, particularly after you've seen the last 3 episodes,
I have
and
not.
if it changes how you see the movie at all.
Have
I
you
I'll
haven't
been-
tell you tonight. I'm watching it tonight with my mom because we finished the show last night, so we're gonna watch it
Bo
tonight.
hasn't done. You haven't done it. Have you done it, Bo?
No, I plan to, I watched season 2, all the screeners in advance before it came out with my partner, and we were so moved at the end of it that we had this instinct to immediately watch Rogue One, and then we can't handle it. We just can't handle it. Like,
Yeah.
it's too raw. It'll hurt too
Yeah.
much in a good way, in all the good.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of, that rainy day where when all of this and the luster of this amazing moment of the reception of the show has worn off just a little bit, pre-nostalgia will become post-nostalgia, and it'll be time to watch Rogue One for me.
I have not. This came up several times yesterday. I have been, and I didn't all the way through. I was very nervous about it. I was reassured by different people who had watched it. I can only partially explain my reasons for not. I think just sheer fear that there's some horrifying thing that's wrong. It was on. I was doing the dishes a couple months ago, and it was on. I watched about 10, 12 minutes, and I was like, okay, that's okay. Everything in there is fine. But I'm gonna try to watch it this weekend because it's getting embarrassing to answer this question the way I just have.
Well, wait a minute. Let me clarify. You have never seen the movie?
Oh no. Oh no. I've seen a lot. No, I just
Okay.
watched it in the context of season 2.
Gotcha.
Oh no,
Okay,
I've seen
good.
Rogue One.
Whew. I was about to be even more
Up and
impressed by
down,
you.
up and down. I've seen Rogue One. Yeah.
So, well, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us with this conversation. Man, I could talk to you all day because I am that Star Wars geek who could talk to you about everything. But I just want to say thanks to writers Dan Gilroy, Beau Willimon, and Tom Bissell, and of course, creator, writer, and executive producer Tony Gilroy, who talked to us about the second season of Andor for the Writers Guild Foundation. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Go Writers Guild Foundation.
Yes.